Rain drummed mercilessly on the roof of the car as Detective Lucia Hines parked outside the Lakeview Gardens apartment complex. The elegant 5-story building with its modern architecture contrasted with the gray October sky of Milwaukee. She took a deep breath, glanced at her reflection in the rearview mirror. Tired eyes stared back. A sleepless night spent working on another case was making itself felt. 4th floor, apartment 412, Lucia muttered, looking at the message on her phone. Female, 27 years old, suspected murder. Lucia threw on her raincoat and, jumping over puddles, headed for the entrance. The guard checked the list and let her inside. Already in the elevator, she was mentally preparing herself for what awaited upstairs. The 4th floor corridor was filled with police officers and technicians. Yellow tape labeled "Crime Scene" blocked the entrance to apartment 412. Lucia showed her badge to the officer at the door and stepped inside. "Detective Hines," she introduced herself to the medical examiner leaning over the body. "Dr. Reynolds," he replied, not taking his eyes off his work. "Victim is Jeanette Hornet, age 27. The time of death was sometime between 2 and 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Strangulation, presumably by hand. Signs of a struggle are evident." Lucia looked around the room. The spacious living room with panoramic windows was tastefully furnished. Leather sofa, glass coffee table, abstract paintings on the walls. An open designer suitcase stood in the corner, neatly packed with belongings. Jeanette's body lay between the couch and the table. She was wearing an elegant blue dress, as if she was getting ready to go out somewhere. The dark skin on the victim's neck bore obvious signs of abuse. "She was leaving," Lucia said, nodding toward the suitcase. "Yes, and not alone," one of the officers replied, handing her a clear bag of evidence. "We found 2 plane tickets to Honolulu. The flight was scheduled for tonight, 8 o'clock in the evening." Lucia scrutinized the tickets. One was in Jeanette Hornet's name, the other in Edward Dallin's name. "Edward Dallin?" she questioned. "Who's that?" "We don't know yet," the officer replied, "but it's definitely not her husband. According to the documents, she is married to Zion Gregory." Lucia nodded and continued to look around the apartment. In the bedroom, she found a lamp overturned and things strewn about. Clear signs of a struggle. On the bedside table was a picture of Jeanette with a man, presumably her husband. They were smiling, but something in their eyes told Lucia that the smile was not entirely genuine. "Detective," the technician called out to her, "take a look at this." He pointed to the victim's cell phone found under the bed. The last call had been at 13:30. She had called someone named Edward. The conversation lasted about 2 minutes. "Save all the data from the phone," Lucia instructed, "and check for security cameras in the hallway." When she left the apartment, Lucia began to canvass the neighborhood. Mrs. Clark in apartment 410 was the most informative. "Jeanette was such a nice girl," the older woman sighed. "She worked as a manager at the Eleanor boutique in the mall. Always said hello, sometimes brought me baked goods." "Did you know she was having marital problems?" Lucia asked. Mrs. Clark lowered her voice. "She and Zion fought a lot. He's a successful man who owns an electronics repair company, but he has a temper. Sometimes I could hear him yelling at her. Jeanette said she wanted to open her own boutique, but Zion thought it was a waste of money." "What about Edward Dallin? Does that name ring a bell?" "Oh," Mrs. Clark raised her eyebrows meaningfully. "He's a young man who used to visit Jeanette when Zion was at work. A pharmacist, I think. She had introduced him as a friend, but—" The old lady paused. "You know, the walls are thin. Did you see or hear anything suspicious today? About 2 o'clock I heard a loud argument, but I didn't think much of it. They argued a lot. Then the door slammed, and it was quiet." Lucia thanked Mrs. Clark and continued her questioning. The other neighbors had little to add, but confirmed that Jeanette and Zion's marriage had been strained. Back at the victim's apartment, Lucia noticed that a new person had arrived at the scene. A tall man in his 30s, dressed in an expensive suit, was trying to get through the police cordon. "What's going on here? Where's my wife?" His voice shook with emotion. Lucia approached him. "Are you Zion Gregory?" "Yes, this is my apartment. What's wrong?" Lucia took him aside, away from prying eyes. "Mr. Gregory, I'm sorry, but your wife, Jeanette, is dead. We have reason to believe it's murder." Zion turned pale and staggered back, grabbing the wall for support. "It's impossible," he whispered. "I spoke to her this morning before I left for work." "When was the last time you saw your wife?" Lucia asked, watching his reaction carefully. "Around 9 o'clock this morning. I left for a business meeting and spent the whole day there. We were discussing business expansion with potential investors." "Can you provide the contacts of the people you met with?" "Sure." Zion pulled out his phone and showed me a calendar of meetings. "Here, from 10 to 3, I had a meeting with representatives of Technovav Investments. Then I went to the office, where I got your call." Lucia wrote down the information. Something about Zion's demeanor seemed unnatural to her. His grief seemed genuine, but there was something theatrical. "Mr. Gregory, is the name Edward Dallin familiar to you?" A shadow flashed in Zion's eyes for a second, but he quickly pulled himself together. "No, I don't think so. Should it be?" "We found 2 plane tickets to Honolulu, one in your wife's name, the other in Edward Dallin's name." Zion froze, his face contorted with shock and pain. "What?" "There must be some mistake. Jeanette wasn't going anywhere." "The suitcase in the living room says otherwise," Lucia said softly. Zion sank down on a chair in the hallway, covering his face with his hands. "I don't understand. We were happy. Yes, there were disagreements, but—" His voice trailed off. "Who is this Edward?" Lucia decided not to press. She offered Zion a glass of water and continued. "Mr. Gregory, do you have any idea who might have wanted your wife dead?" "No, I don't. Jeanette was a kind person. Everyone loved her." "What about your marriage?" "Mrs. Clark mentioned that you fought a lot." Zion grinned. "The old gossip." "Yes, we had our differences like any couple. Jeanette wanted to open her own boutique and I thought it was a risk, but I never wanted to hurt her. Never." Lucia nodded, making notes in her notebook. "We'll keep you updated on the investigation. For now, you might want to stay with friends or relatives." Zion looked lost. "Can I see her?" "Better not, Mr. Gregory. Not in this condition." As Zion left, accompanied by the officer, a technician approached Lucia. "Detective, we checked the cameras in the hallway. Around 2 p.m., a man very similar to Mr. Gregory entered the apartment. He said he was in a business meeting all day," Lucia said thoughtfully. "And one more thing," the technician continued. "We found this in the victim's suitcase." He held out an envelope to Lucia. Inside were documents, bank statements, strange transfers for large sums of money, incomprehensible invoices. They were all related to Zion Gregory's business. "Looks like Mrs. Hornet was going to bring more than just summer dresses," Lucia muttered. It was evening. The rain had intensified, turning the streets of Milwaukee into muddy streams. Lucia stood at the window in Jeanette's apartment, watching the city below. Now, at 8 p.m., Jeanette and Edward should have been on their way to Hawaii, to a new life. Instead, one of them was lying in the morgue, and the other was probably waiting for her at the airport, unaware of the tragedy. "Detective," the officer called out to her. "We're done here. The body has been taken away." Lucia nodded. "Good. Tomorrow morning I want the autopsy results and a full evidence report. And find me this Edward Dallin." She took another look around the apartment. Somewhere in here, the truth was hidden. Someone had cut short the life of a young woman who dreamed of a better future, and Lucia was determined to find that person. As she stepped outside, she pulled out her cell phone and dialed her superior's number. "Captain, we have a homicide. Jeanette Hornet, 27 years old. Strangulation. Husband claims he was at a business meeting, but the cameras show him in the house at the time of the murder. There's also a lover, Edward Dallin. They were planning to fly to Hawaii tonight." "Sounds like a classic love triangle," the captain retorted. "Maybe, but there's more to it than that. Jeanette has collected documents that may indicate financial fraud in her husband's business. I need to check both men's alibis and find Dallin. He was supposed to meet her at the airport." "Go ahead, Hines. Keep me posted." Lucia got into the car and turned on the heater. The case seemed simple at first glance. A jealous husband killing an unfaithful wife. But something told her it was more complicated than that, and she was determined to get to the bottom of it, whatever it took. It was a cold morning. Lucia Hines shivered as she entered the Milwaukee Police Department building. The night had brought little rest. The image of Jeanette Hornet haunted her dreams. A young woman whose life had been cut short on the threshold of new opportunities. Waiting for Lucia in the office was a glass of coffee and a folder with the preliminary results of the autopsy. The medical examiner had confirmed the initial diagnosis. Death was asphyxiation due to manual strangulation. Time of death was between 4 o'clock and 6 p.m. "Detective Hines," the young officer addressed her, "we found Edward Dallin. He spent all night at the airport waiting for Jeanette. He's in the interrogation room now." Lucia nodded and grabbed the file folder and headed in that direction. Through the looking glass, she saw a man in his 30s sitting at a desk. The dark circles under his eyes spoke of a sleepless night, and his tense posture suggested deep anxiety. "Mr. Dallin," Lucia said hello as she entered the room. "I'm Detective Hines. Thank you for agreeing to talk to us." Edward looked up at her with a look of alarm. "Where's Jeanette? What's wrong? She's not answering her cell phone, and no one will tell me what's going on." Lucia sat down across from him and said softly, "Mr. Dallin, I'm sorry, but Jeanette Hornet is dead. She was found yesterday in her apartment. We're investigating it as a murder." Edward turned pale. His hands began to shake and he put his head around. "No, it's impossible. We were supposed to leave last night, to start a new life." "Tell me about your relationship with Jeanette," Lucia asked, watching his reaction carefully. Edward took a deep breath, trying to collect his thoughts. "We met about a year ago at the pharmacy where I work. She came in to get some medicine. We got to talking and I asked her out for coffee. I didn't know she was married at the time. She wasn't wearing a ring." "And when did you find out?" "A month later. By then we'd already, close. She told me that her marriage to Zion was a mistake, that he controlled her every move, every penny, wouldn't let her develop." Lucia took notes without interrupting. "For the last 3 months, we've been planning to leave. Start fresh in Hawaii. I have a friend there who could help us with a job. Jeanette dreamed of opening her own boutique, and I could get a job at the local pharmacy." "Did Zion know about your relationship?" Edward shook his head. Jeanette was sure he didn't. She was very afraid of his reaction. She'd said he had fits of rage when he lost control. "Where were you yesterday between 14 and 16 o'clock?" "At work, at the Wellness Pharmacy on Main Street. My shift ended at 17, then I went to the airport. We agreed to meet there so Zion wouldn't get suspicious. Jeanette said she would make up some story about the business trip." Lucia nodded. "We'll check your alibi. Now tell me more about Jeanette. What was she like?" Edward's eyes filled with warmth and pain at the same time. "She was amazing, talented, smart, had great taste. She was a boutique manager, but she wanted more. She wanted to design her own clothing collections. Zion thought it was bliss, but I believed in her." "What do you know about Zion's business?" Edward frowned. "Not much. Some kind of electronics repair company. Jeanette said it was doing well, but the last few months she'd noticed something strange. Said the numbers in the paperwork didn't add up." "What kind of things?" "I don't know the details, but about a month ago, she happened to see some papers in Zion's home office. Said she thought he was doing something illegal. She was going to take copies with her to Hawaii." Lucia remembered the documents found in Jeanette's suitcase. Looks like the husband had a strong motive to get rid of his wife. "Mr. Dallin, did you ever meet Zion?" "No, never. Jeanette was very careful. We met either at my place or in places where no one knew us." "Does the name Marvin Gentry mean anything to you?" Edward thought for a moment. "I think it's Zion's best friend. Jeanette mentioned him a couple times. A financial consultant, if I'm not mistaken. He and Zion have been friends since college." After a few more questions, Lucia thanked Edward and left the room. She instructed an officer to check his alibi and went to meet with the captain. "How's the investigation going?" Captain Mills asked as Lucia entered his office. "Edward Dallin claims to have been at work at the time of the murder. Checking. The story of his affair with Jeanette sounds plausible. They were planning a new life in Hawaii, away from a controlling husband." "What about Zion Gregory?" "His alibi is falling apart. He claimed he was in a business meeting all day, but cameras caught him at the victim's house around the time of the murder. Besides, he had a strong motive. Jeanette had found documents indicating possible financial fraud in his business and was going to take them with her." The captain tapped his fingers on the table thoughtfully. "Keep digging. check his business, his contacts, all financial transactions, and find this Marvin Gentry. Lucia spent the next few hours researching Zion Gregory's business. Technoservice, an electronics repair company, looked successful at first glance. Several locations throughout the city, good customer reviews. But something was bugging Lucia. She contacted the police finance department and requested a detailed analysis of the documents found in Jeanette's suitcase. Then she dialed the number for Technovav Investments, the company Zion said he'd met with on the day of the murder. "Miss Thompson? This is Detective Hines with the Milwaukee Police Department. I'm investigating the case, and I'd like to ask if Zion Gregory met with representatives of your company yesterday." Pause on the other end of the line, then an uncertain answer. "Yes, he did. From 10 o'clock in the morning until..." The woman hesitated. "Until about noon." "Not until 3 o'clock in the afternoon as planned?" "No, the meeting ended earlier. Mr. Gregory got some urgent call and left." Lucia thanked Miss Thompson and made a note in her notebook. Another of Zion's lies. The meeting ended at noon, not 3 o'clock. What was he doing between 12 and 14 o'clock when the cameras caught him outside the victim's house? By late afternoon, Lucia had gotten Marvin Gentry's address. He worked at First National Bank of Milwaukee and lived in an elegant townhouse in an upscale neighborhood. Marvin Gentry greeted Lucia with wariness. The tall, trim man in an expensive suit looked tense. "Mr. Gentry, I'm Detective Hines. I'm investigating the murder of Jeanette Horney." "Yes," Zion told me, "a terrible tragedy." Lucia saw a muscle twitch in his cheek. "I'd like to ask you a few questions. How long have you known Zion Gregory?" "Since college. We went to school together, then we started a business together. I helped him with the financial side of Technoservice." "And Jeanette?" "I met her about 3 years ago when they first started dating. Beautiful, smart girl. Zion was crazy about her, but they'd been having problems lately." Marvin paused for a moment. All couples have hard times. Jeanette wanted something of her own, independence. Zion, he's the kind of man who prefers to be in control. "Where were you yesterday between 14 and 16 o'clock, Mr. Gentry?" Marvin tensed even more. "At work, at the bank. I had meetings with clients all day." "Did Zion contact you yesterday?" "Yeah, he called around noon. Said his investor meeting ended early and asked if I could have lunch with him." "And what did you say?" "That I couldn't. I had an appointment." Lucia watched Marvin's facial expression carefully. There was something he wasn't telling her. "Mr. Gentry, did you know that Jeanette was planning to leave Zion?" Marvin looked away. "No, that's news to me." "And what do you know about Technoservice's financial situation?" "The company is stable. Zion has a good customer base, a steady income. And no financial fraud? Strange transfers, discrepancies in documents?" Marvin paled. "I don't know what you're talking about. Zion is an honest businessman." "Then explain this." Lucia pulled copies of documents from Jeanette's suitcase. Large sums transferred to offshore accounts, fictitious purchases of equipment, inflated expenses. Marvin studied the documents, his face turning even paler. I didn't know about this. There must be some explanation. Or Zion was laundering money and Jeanette found out about it, and was going to leave with the evidence." "Detective," Marvin swallowed. "Zion is my friend. I can't believe he's capable of murder." "What about financial fraud?" Marvin was silent for a moment, then said quietly, "In the last year, things haven't gone as well as he said. There were new competitors and profits were down. Zion took out loans, but it wasn't enough. I tried to help, but you decided to turn a blind eye to his illegal operations?" "I didn't know the details," Marvin exclaimed. "He said he'd found investors to help take the business to the next level." Lucia made a note in her notebook. "Mr. Gentry, you'd better tell everything you know. Because right now, all the evidence points to Zion, and if you're covering up for a murderer, that makes you an accessory." Marvin turned even paler. "Yeah, I have to think about it. Maybe I need a lawyer." "Perhaps," Lucia agreed. "But remember, the sooner you decide to cooperate, the better for you." After leaving Marvin's house, Lucia called the station. "I need a search warrant for Gregory's apartment and his office, and send a unit to keep an eye on Marvin Gentry. Something tells me he knows more than he's letting on." That evening, Lucia returned to Jeanette and Zion's apartment. With the warrant in hand, She could now inspect the premises more thoroughly, especially Zion's home office, which had been sealed yesterday. The office looked immaculate. Neat desk, state-of-the-art computer, minimalist design. Lucia methodically went through the desk drawers, the shelves, every corner of the room. In the top drawer of the desk, she found a small notebook. Flipping through it, Lucia found notes in a woman's neat handwriting, apparently Jeanette's, dates, amounts, account numbers, strange abbreviations. Jeanette seemed to be conducting her own investigation into her husband's financial affairs. In another drawer, Lucia found a flash drive. She plugged it into her laptop. The flash drive contained copies of the same documents found in the suitcase, but also spreadsheets, emails, and screenshots of bank transactions. Jeanette had been gathering evidence against her husband for months. As she continued her examination, Lucia noticed something odd in the corner of the room. A small hole in the wall, barely visible to the naked eye. She stepped closer, and as she studied it, she realized it was the lens of a miniature camera. Lucia's heart beat faster. She started looking for other cameras and found two more. One in the bedroom, embedded in a ceiling light fixture, and one in the living room, hidden in a bookshelf. "Officer Johnson," she called out, "we need a technician. There are hidden cameras in the apartment." An hour later, the technician arrived and confirmed Lucia's find. "It's a state-of-the-art surveillance system," he explained. "The cameras are connected to a server that must be somewhere here in the apartment." After a thorough search, they found a small server hidden behind a false panel in the dressing room. "The system records everything on a hard disk," the specialist said, examining the device. "According to the settings, it activates when motion is detected in the rooms. So if there was a murder in the apartment yesterday, it must have been recorded." The specialist nodded. "All we have to do is retrieve the data." Lucia felt a chill run down her spine. If the cameras had been running yesterday, they might have captured Jeanette Hornet's last moments, and possibly the face of her killer. "How quickly can you get access to the footage?" she asked. "It'll take some time. The system is password protected." "Do your best," Lucia insisted. "These records could be the key to solving the case." While the specialist worked on the server, Lucia called the captain. "Sir, we found hidden cameras in the victim's apartment. If we can access the footage, we may be able to see what happened yesterday." "Good work, Hines," the captain said. "Keep me posted." Lucia looked at her watch. It was late evening, but she felt she was close to a clue. Jeanette Hornet's murder had seemed a simple case of jealousy, but now a more complex picture was emerging. Financial fraud, hidden cameras, a witness who wasn't telling the truth. "Detective," the technician called out to her, "I was able to bypass the first level of protection, but it will take time to access the recordings themselves." Lucia nodded. "Keep working. In the meantime, I'll take another look around the apartment." She slowly walked around all the rooms, trying to visualize what had happened here yesterday. Jeanette was packing her things, preparing for her new life. Zion probably found out about her plans, came home earlier than usual. They'd had a fight, but there was something else, something Lucia hadn't seen yet. "Detective!" The technician's excited voice interrupted her musings. "I've accessed the records. You should see this." Lucia leaned over the laptop screen, watching the footage recovered from the hidden camera server. The footage was intermittent. The system worked intermittently, activating only when motion was detected. But even the fragmented video was enough to see the key moments of yesterday. On the screen, Jeanette Hornet was packing her suitcase, carefully folding her clothes and documents. Her movements were hurried but methodical. The clock in the corner of the screen showed 13:45. Then the recording was interrupted and resumed at 14:10. Zion Gregory appeared in the frame. "There he is," Lucia murmured. Exactly the time he said he was in a business meeting. On the tape, Zion looked agitated. He entered the apartment, looked around, and headed for the bedroom where Jeanette was finishing packing. There was no sound, but it was clear from the gesticulation that a tense conversation had broken out between the couple. Jeanette pointed to the suitcase. Zion shook his head, his face contorted with anger. Unfortunately, the most important moment, the murder, was not caught on camera. The recording stopped at 14:20 and didn't resume until 15:05, when it was just Zion, moving nervously around the apartment. He was looking for something, checking drawers, closets. Then he left the apartment and the tape stopped again. It's not perfect, but it's something, Lucia told the technician. It proves that Zion lied about his whereabouts, and he was in the apartment around the time of the murder. But there's no actual act of murder, the technician pointed out. That's enough to nail him to the wall. Make a copy of the tape and send it to the station. Lucia began the next morning with a meeting in the captain's office. In addition to her, 2 other detectives and the prosecutor were present. This is what we have here, Lucia began, spreading out the papers on the table. Jeanette Hornet, 27 years old, found dead in her apartment, cause of death. Strangulation, time of death, between 14 and 16 o'clock the day before yesterday. She was planning to leave with her lover, Edward Dallin, for Hawaii that same afternoon. She was carrying documents implicating her husband, Zion Gregory, in financial fraud. Motive is clear, the prosecutor nodded. Jealousy plus fear of exposure. Zion's alibi doesn't hold up to scrutiny, Lucia continued. He claimed he was in a business meeting until 3 o'clock in the afternoon, but the meeting ended at noon. Hidden cameras in the apartment recorded his presence there around 2 in the afternoon, during an argument with his wife. Unfortunately, the footage is interrupted, and there's no footage of the murder itself. What about Dallin? The captain asked. His alibi checks out. He was at work at the time of the murder. There are witnesses and surveillance footage from the pharmacy. And Marvin Gentry? One of the detectives asked. This is where it gets interesting. Lucia opened a folder of new documents. Gentry's surveillance showed that last night, after my visit, he met with Zion Gregory at the Blue Lotus bar. The conversation was tense. They were clearly arguing. Afterward, Gentry called his lawyer. Do you think he decided to cooperate? The captain asked. Quite possibly. I've set up a meeting with him for 11 o'clock, and I'm questioning Zion Gregory at 9. We have enough to hold him for questioning, but we need more for the prosecution. Has the finance department finished analyzing the documents? The prosecutor asked. Yes, and the results are impressive. Lucia handed out copies of the report. Zion Gregory used his business to launder money. He created fictitious purchases, inflated expenses, withdrew money through shell companies. In the last year, about $5 million of obscure origin passed through his accounts. Where did the money come from? The captain asked. It has not been established yet, but there are suspicions that he is connected to drug traffickers. His company may have been used to launder their proceeds. The prosecutor whistled. If that's true, the motive for murder becomes even stronger. Jeanette could have ruined not only his business, but could have put him behind bars for years. Exactly, Lucia nodded. Our theory is that Jeanette accidentally discovered evidence of her husband's illegal activities. Perhaps she had been unhappy in her marriage for a long time and was already dating Dallin, but this discovery was the last straw. She decided to leave her husband and take the evidence with her. How did Zion find out about her plans? The detective asked. Hidden cameras, replied Lucia. He installed a surveillance system in the apartment, perhaps suspecting his wife of infidelity, and could see her packing her suitcase and papers. Good work, Hines, the captain nodded. Reap him in the interrogation. At 9 o'clock, Lucia entered the interrogation room where Zion Gregory was already waiting for her. He looked tired and tense, but still held his dignity. Mr. Gregory, Lucia began, sitting down across from him. Thank you for coming. We have some new questions in connection with your wife's murder. I want to help the investigation, Zion replied. Jeanette deserves justice. Lucia put a folder of documents on the table. Mr. Gregory, you claim that on the day of the murder, you were in a business meeting with representatives of Technovav Investments until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Is that correct? Yes, that's correct. That's odd, because the company spokeswoman, Miss Thompson, says the meeting ended around noon. You received some kind of call and left in a hurry. Zion visibly tensed up. Perhaps I was mistaken. It was a very busy day. How do you explain the fact that the security cameras caught you entering the Lakeview Gardens apartment complex at 14:05? I might have stopped home for lunch, Zion answered uncertainly. I don't remember exactly. Lucia pulled out her laptop and turned it toward Zion. And you don't remember this either? She turned on the camera footage of Zion entering the apartment and arguing with Jeanette. Zion's face turned pale. Where did you get this? Hidden cameras, Mr. Gregory. The same ones you installed in your apartment. They recorded you during an argument with your wife, just before she was murdered. Zion was silent, his eyes roving around the room. Mr. Gregory, we also found evidence of your financial fraud, money laundering, sham purchases, suspicious transfers to offshore accounts. Jeanette found out about it and was going to take the documents with her to Hawaii. I need a lawyer, Zion finally said. Of course, that's your right. But before we finish, I want you to know that we've already spoken to Edward Dallin. His alibi for the time of the murder has been confirmed, and we're meeting with Marvin Gentry today. He seems more, cooperative since your meeting at the Blue Lotus yesterday. Zion looked up sharply. Were you following me? Marvin, actually. And it seems your conversation was not a pleasant one. What did you say to your best friend, Mr. Gregory? Asked him to lie about your whereabouts on the day of the murder? Zion refused to answer further questions without an attorney, and Lucia ended the questioning, but she was sure she had him cornered. Now much depended on Marvin Gentry's testimony. At 11 o'clock, Marvin arrived at the station accompanied by his attorney, an elegant, middle-aged woman with a tenacious gaze. Mr. Gentry is willing to cooperate with the investigation, she said, as soon as they were seated, in exchange for immunity from prosecution for perjury. It depends on the value of the information he provides, Lucia replied. But if it helps solve Jeanette Hornet's murder, I'm sure the prosecutor will be willing to cooperate. The lawyer nodded, and Marvin began to speak. Zion called me around noon that day, said his meeting with the investors was over and he was on his way home. He sounded strange, excited. I asked if everything was okay, and he said he had an argument with Jeanette that morning and he needed to talk to her. Did he say what the argument was about? Lucia asked. No, but Marvin hesitated. He had told me a week earlier that he suspected Jeanette of cheating on him. He installed cameras in the apartment and saw that she was seeing some man when he wasn't home. Edward Dallin, Lucia nodded. Apparently so. Zion was furious but said he'd deal with it himself. Go on, what happened next? Around 3 in the afternoon, Zion called again. The voice. I'd never heard him like that before. He said, I screwed up, Marv. Everything went wrong. I asked what happened, but he didn't answer directly. Said only, if anyone asks, I was with you after the investor meeting. We were having lunch, discussing the new project. And you agreed to lie for him? Marvin lowered his head. Yes, we've been friends since college. I thought maybe he just had a fight with Jeanette, maybe even hit her and he needed an alibi. I didn't know that she was dead, Lucia finished for him. Yes, when you came to me and told me about the murder, I was shocked. But even then, I couldn't believe that Zion... Marvin took a deep breath. It wasn't until yesterday when we met at the bar that I realized he really did it. He didn't confess outright, but he said that he had to defend himself, that Jeanette was going to destroy him. Because of the documents about the financial fraud. Marvin nodded. Zion had always been creative in financial matters. But for the last year, things had gotten worse. His business was losing money and he got involved with some people. I don't know the details. He wouldn't share them with me, but I suspected something was fishy. And you, as a financial advisor, didn't try to stop him? I did, Marvin exclaimed. But Zion, he's very persuasive when he wants to be. Said everything was under control, that these were temporary measures, and then it was too late. Lucia took careful notes. The picture was slowly coming together. What else did Zion say to you in the bar last night? He was drunk and scared. Said you'd found cameras in the apartment and that I'd better stick to our story. Threatened that if I talked, he'd drag me down with him. He'd say I knew everything he was up to. Is that true? Marvin looked at the lawyer, and she nodded. Partly, he admitted. I knew that not all of Zion's operations were legitimate, but I didn't realize the extent of it, and I certainly didn't think he was capable of murder. After questioning Marvin, Lucia returned to the captain with a full report. The prosecutor, after hearing all the evidence, gave the go-ahead to arrest Zion Gregory on the charge of first-degree murder. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, a team of police officers arrived at the techno-service office. Zion was in his office, and when he saw Lucia with the arrest warrant, he didn't even look surprised. Marvin told you, didn't he? he asked tiredly as the officer handcuffed him. "Mr. Gregory, you are under arrest for the murder of Jeanette Hornet. You have the right to remain silent." As the officer read him his rights, Lucia stared into Zion's eyes. There was no remorse or fear in them, only the humility of a man who knew the game was over. At the station, after Zion had consulted a lawyer, he suddenly decided to confess. Perhaps realizing there was enough evidence against him, or maybe tired of the weight of his secret. "I didn't plan to kill her," he began quietly. "Honestly, I just wanted to talk, to convince her to stay. When I saw on the cameras that she was packing a suitcase, I knew she was really leaving. And those files, she found everything. She dug up my accounts, my transactions, everything." "Why didn't you stop your illegal activities when you realized she knew?" Lucia asked. Zion grinned bitterly. "It was too late. I was in too deep. These people, they're not the kind of people you can just cut ties with." He paused. "When I got home, we had a fight. I begged her to stay, offered to fix things. But she said she loved someone else and was not only going to leave, she was going to turn over the documents to the authorities." Zion lowered his head, his voice barely audible. "I just lost control." Grabbing her by the shoulders, he began to shake her. She screamed, tried to break free, and then my hands were around her neck, and I don't remember how long it went on. By the time I came to, she wasn't breathing. Lucia was writing down her confession, feeling not the satisfaction of a solved case, but a deep sadness. Another life cut short by anger, jealousy, and fear. "What did you do next?" she asked. Panicked. Tried to figure out what to do. I looked for Jeanette's cell phone, wanted to know who she was texting. Then I remembered about the cameras and tried to delete the recordings, but the system was glitching. I thought maybe the footage hadn't been saved. He looked up at Lucia with a tired look. "I didn't mean for this to happen. I really didn't." That evening, as she finished her case report, Lucia remembered the words her mentor had once told her. "Behind every crime there's a story, and it's almost always the story of a man who backed himself into a corner from which he thought there was only one way out." Zion Gregory's story was exactly that. A series of bad decisions that led to disaster. First the financial shenanigans, then the distrust of his wife, the installation of cameras, the desperate attempt to keep control of the situation, and finally, the violent outbreak that cut short the life of a young woman who dreamed of a new beginning. Lucia closed the case file. Zion Gregory was facing a trial and probably many years in prison, but no punishment would give Jeanette Hornet back her stolen future. Nor would it give her back the chance for a fresh start on the sunny beaches of Hawaii with the man she'd chosen. As she packed her things, Lucia noticed a picture of Jeanette on her desk, a smiling young woman with clear eyes full of hope. This was how she had been in life, and this was how she should be remembered. "Justice has been done, Jeanette," Lucia said softly. "I hope that wherever you are now, you are at peace." And with those words, Detective Lucia Hines went home, leaving behind another case solved, another tragedy, another broken mirror of human lives and destinies.